What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you the wide receiver and tight end starts and sits for week 9 of fantasy football. As I do every Thursday, I go over the wide receiver position as a whole, every fantasy relevant wide receiver and tight end, go over their usage rates, what's, the newest trends that we're seeing with these guys, the wide receiver cornerback matchups they're going to see this week in fantasy football, whether you should start them, sit them, flex them, whatever the case may be, buy them low, sell them high, whatever the case is. So if you guys enjoy this video at any point, as always, go down to the bottom of the video right now and hit the like button. It helps us grow. It helps us out tremendously. Subscribe to the channel if you are new and leave a comment down below. We will get to whatever question that you might have. So without further ado, guys, let's hit the intro. All right, so a couple teams on bye this week. Of course, as I talked about yesterday, Seattle, Detroit, Washington, and Tampa Bay. Those guys will be on bye. That means no Terry McLaurin. It means, no DK Metcalf, no Buccaneers wide receivers. So Thursday Night Football, the first game that we have on the docket today is Jets at Colts. Again, the return of Mike White. Let's see if he can do it again. But in this game, you're going to be starting Michael Pittman Jr., flexing Jamison Crowder. So Michael Pittman Jr., 24% target share, 34% of the Colts air yards, and 25% of the end zone targets this year. You start Michael Pittman every week. He's been phenomenal the past couple of weeks. I did talk about him as a sell high candidate on Tuesday's show because, his value is so high right now that you might be able to buy low on guys like Terry McLaurin, on guys like Mike Williams, somebody that has, a more favorable future. But with Michael Pittman Jr., because he's performing so well as of late, you might be able to get up to some of those guys. But on the Jets side of things, Jamison Crowder is startable with Corey Davis doubtful for this game with a hip injury. It is worth noting that Keelan Cole and Denzel Mims ran more routes last week than Elijah Moore did in recent weeks as well. So if you have Elijah Moore available on your waiver wire, I still think he's a great stash. And he did have a career high in yards and receptions last week. So continue to stash him if he's on waivers because he could have a strong back half of the season. So as you guys can see on the screen, these are the matchups. Jamison Crowder is expected to see Kenny Moore in coverage. Pretty good matchup advantage for him there. Michael Pittman Jr. mostly splitting time between Bryce Hall and Eccles there. So again, pretty easy start for both of those guys. Tight end, don't start Mo Alley Cox. He's still running less than 40% of the Colts routes. Not a guy that I really want to be messing with. So, pretty straightforward, pretty easy and kind of boring Thursday night football game that we're going to have this week. But the 1 p.m. games, Falcons at Saints, the first game that we have here. In this game, you're going to start 0 wide receivers. And now I count Cordero Patterson as a running back, so he's the only wide receiver technically that'd be starting in this. But I did talk about him yesterday, so I'm not going to rehash his arguments here. 42-point over-under in this game with concentrated production on the Saints side of things with Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, and on the Falcons side of things with Kyle Pitts and Cordero Patterson. I'm not really interested in starting Russell Gage, Olamide Zaccheaus, Marquez Callaway, anybody that's kind of like a middling wide receiver in this game. I'm just not interested in, with no Calvin Ridley on the Atlanta Falcons right now. Here are the matchups if I'm desperate, but again, like I said, I'm probably not messing with any of these guys. Marquez Callaway does look to have the best matchup of any of the wide receivers, but at the tight end position, Kyle Pitts is basically a wide receiver 1 for this team now that Calvin Ridley is away from the team. He's played a combined 28 snaps in line over the past 3 games compared to 62 snaps from the slot and 50 snaps out wide. So again, this is basically a wide receiver. On the matchup chart, you're basically going to see Kyle Pitts go up against primarily Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Paulson Adebo, and Marshawn Lattimore. He's not really going to be seeing a whole lot of safeties and linebackers covering because he basically plays wide receiver. So moving on to the Broncos at Cowboys, the next game that we have here. In this game, you're going to be starting Cortland Sutton, starting Jerry Jeudy, starting CeeDee Lamb, and starting Amari Cooper. Again, now CeeDee Lamb did have a sprained ankle in practice, according to a sleeper report that I got right before I started recording. So CeeDee Lamb might have his status a little bit up in the air right now, something to monitor for sure. Not something that I think is overly concerning, but it definitely could pop up towards the end of the week if he is, questionable heading into this game or doubtful or something like that. So the big 2 receivers on both teams are going to be starting in this game. Jerry Jeudy's return last week kind of shook some things up in the Broncos wide receiver core. As you guys can see on the screen right now, they did have the same target share, him and Cortland. Jerry Jeudy was limited, as I expected. 77% of the routes is not the normal allotment that he should be running. I'd expect him and Tim Patrick to kind of switch roles going forward, where Tim Patrick's running about 75% of the routes and Jerry Jeudy's up near the 95% range going forward, because this was his first game back from a 6-week absence. So I'm guessing they're just kind of ramping him up. and getting him ready for full playing time, quick to not re-aggravate the ankle injury that he suffered. So with Judy out, Cortland Sutton was one of the top receivers in the league in air yards, and that number dipped with him back. As you guys can see on the screen, like I said, 26% of the air yards last week when he'd been typically around the 40% range on average over the course of the season. So this is going to hurt Cortland Sutton. It is going to hurt everybody else in the offense from a volume perspective. But what I think this does is raise the ceiling of this offense from a point scored perspective and things of that nature. On the Cowboys side of things, Cooper and Lamb are every week starters as long as they're in there. Broncos currently rank 21st in pass defense DVOA on the season, and they just traded their best pass rusher, Von Miller, to the Rams. So the Broncos defense isn't really one to be scared of. We thought coming into this season that they might be some fierce defense. Hasn't really panned out quite yet. As you guys can see the matchups on the screen, Jerry Jeudy against Jordan Lewis, primarily in coverage in the slot, is going to be absolutely phenomenal for him. Cortland Sutton will see a lot of Trevon Diggs, so they're probably going to avoid throwing to Cortland Sutton in this game. Could be a down game for him, probably down tick him just a little bit in my rankings. CeeDee Lamb, like I said, if he plays, Ronald Darby will be his primary matchup, and then Amari Cooper splitting time between Pat Surtain and Bryce Callahan in the slot. So not an easy matchup for Amari Cooper specifically. So if Lamb does play, he'd be the guy that I would start if I have the choice between the two Cowboys wide receivers. At the tight end position, both of these guys are starts. Start Noah Fant if he plays, and start Dalton Schultz. Now, Noah Fant is currently on the COVID list, so if he doesn't play, I think you can start Albert Okwuegbunam, who basically caused Noah Fant's routes last week to drop from the mid 80% range where he's been since Albert O and Jerry Jeudy have been out. Now with those two guys coming back, 70% around that range is where Noah Fant was sitting in terms of the routes. But like I said, the efficiency of the offense is probably going to go up with all these guys coming back because the offense was very good at the beginning of the season, scoring a lot more points than they've been scoring as of late. Rising tide raises all ships. It's going to increase their efficiency, but Fant might see a bit of a downtick in terms of volume. Like I said, if he's out, Albert Okwuegbunam is a guy that you can play in this game. And Dalton Schultz getting Dak Prescott back is obviously going to help him this week. Still a guy that I'm starting as an every week top 12 tight end. The next game that we have here, Patriots at Panthers. In this game, you're going to start DJ Moore, low-end flex Jacoby Myers, and sit Robbie Anderson. Now, there's basically conkies left, right, and center for Carolina, literally left, right, and center. Their center man, Sam Darnold, has a concussion. Their left wide receiver, Robbie Anderson, has a concussion. Their right wide receiver, Terrace Marshall, has a concussion. So literally left, right, and center is where they have concussions on this roster right now. And all of these guys are questionable heading into this game. So DJ Moore, again, if he has PJ Walker starting as the quarterback, no Robbie Anderson, no Terrace Marshall, he's probably going to see a huge target share. But I'd imagine, a couple of these guys play. It's just going to be a matter of who practices and who clears the protocol and things of that nature. I'd imagine Robbie Anderson will probably be okay. But Terrace Marshall's been dealing with this for a couple of weeks, so it might be a little more serious. And Sam Darnold didn't seem like he was going to be overly optimistic to play this week. So could be a PJ Walker-led Carolina Panthers offense for DJ Moore and company. So DJ Moore, like I said, remains a huge buy low candidate. He commands a 30% target share, 40% of the team's air yards, and 40% of the end zone targets. He is a massive buy low candidate right now. I know he's not been the most consistent guy, mainly due to Sam Darnold in the offense, but with Christian McCaffrey potentially coming back this week or in the future, rising tide raises all ships. With Christian McCaffrey back in the offense, it's going to make DJ Moore more efficient. It's going to make Sam Darnold or PJ Walker, whoever's playing quarterback, more efficient to have Christian McCaffrey back there. So that helps DJ Moore overall. And once that happens, we did see DJ Moore absolutely balling out with Christian McCaffrey on the field to start the season. So I am optimistic about DJ Moore going forward. If you can buy him low, and Michael Pittman's a perfect example of this. Michael Pittman is performing well right now. DJ Moore is not performing well right now. I would much rather have DJ Moore rest of season than Michael Pittman because he's a better player and he's getting a higher target share, higher air yard share of his team's offense. So I would rather have DJ Moore going forward. If you can pull off a 1-for-1 swap like that, I would absolutely do that. So Jacoby Myers, on the other hand, hasn't been a very high ceiling option. As we know, he's never scored a career touchdown, posting 4 straight games in the last 4 weeks of under 60 yards. And we know he isn't going to score any touchdowns anytime soon. He's wide receiver 36 on the week for me right now, but he's kind of clumped into an area with Tyler Boyd and Jarvis Landry of guys that are kind of just low ceiling options that you can throw into your lineup in PPR formats, but in standard or half PPR even, they're not very exciting options because they don't have a lot of touchdown upside. So as you guys can see on the screen, these are the matchups. Jacoby Myers seeing a lot of AJ Boye in the slot, Dante Jackson outside with Nelson Aguilar, DJ Moore splitting time between JC Jackson and Jalen Mills. Now, of course, without Jonathan Jones, no longer with the Patriots dealing with an injury, DJ Moore should have a good matchup advantage, as you guys can see, when he's on Jalen Mills and not on JC Jackson. So could be a big game for DJ Moore. Like I said, his buying window is going to be closing pretty soon. At the tight end position, start Hunter Henry. Pretty much every year, we get one of these touchdown or bust tight end options. We had Jimmy Graham in the past. We had some of these other guys. Pretty much this year, it is Hunter Henry, averaging just over 4 targets per game, but one of those targets every game is a red zone target. So he has a good chance of getting into the end zone each and every week because he is a feature part of their red zone offense, but not a guy that you want to be starting or trading away for better tight end options because he's simply not very highly involved in the offense. He just gets involvement in the red zone where he can pay off. And his weekly ceiling is usually like 4 for 30 and a touchdown. That's usually what kind of weekly ceiling you're going to get out of Hunter Henry due to his low volume. So the next game that we have here, Vikings at Ravens. In this game, you can start Justin Jefferson, start Adam Thielen, and start Marquise Brown. Typically, we've seen Justin Jefferson have success versus man coverage. And I saw a couple people tweet this out. Ron Stewart, good friend of the show, tweeted out that he has the best PFF receiving grade in the league against man coverage right now. And the Ravens run the man coverage at the 5th highest rate in the NFL right now. Also a guy that I think is probably a decent buy low candidate because we saw him have a pretty down performance in prime time. Again, you're probably going to still have to spend up to get a guy like Justin Jefferson, but he could be in for a monster game in this one. Going to be a big time target of mine in DFS this week. Marlon Humphrey got waxed for 227 yards and 2 touchdowns by T. Higgins and Jamar Chase 2 weeks ago before the Ravens bought. Marlon Humphrey being the primary matchup, as you guys can see on the screen, for Justin Jefferson doesn't really scare me one bit. On the other side of things, though, we have Marquise Brown. Targets have been a little feast or famine for Marquise Brown. He's got games of like 11 targets, 14 targets, 12 targets, and then he's got 5, 6, 7, 5 target games. So it's a little bit weird how he's being targeted and how he's being used in the offense. But Rashad Breeland in coverage is an easy matchup for Marquise Brown. Another guy that I really like in DFS lineups this week, if you want to do a mini stack, Justin Jefferson and Marquise Brown, or if you want to stack this game outright and go Lamar, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, and run it back with Justin Jefferson, that's probably going to be something that I do in DFS this week. So Adam Thielen, again, I don't really need to touch on him. You guys know what you're getting with Adam Thielen, a highly targeted guy that has a good chance of getting into the end zone. At the tight end position, start Mark Andrews, sit Tyler Conklin. Again, I'm not messing with Tyler Conklin. Mark Andrews, though, 3rd highest target share among tight ends. Vikings have been pretty stingy against the tight end position this year, but Mark Andrews, much like Kyle Pitts, much like Mike Gesicki, does play a lot of the time in the slot, so he's more so a slot receiver than he is a tight end, and they're allowing the 6th fewest adjusted fantasy points allowed to the tight end position, though. Just worth noting. All right, on to the Browns at Bengals, the next game that we have to talk about here. In this game, you're going to be starting Jamar Chase, starting T. Higgins, flexing Jarvis Landry and Tyler Boyd, and sitting Odell Beckham Jr. And if you guys notice behind me, I have a brand new signed Odell Beckham Jr., when he's making the catch with the Giants. It's a nice addition to the backdrop for you guys. But basically, since week 5, the Bengals offense is passing the ball at nearly a 60% rate in neutral situations, which ranks top 8 in the NFL. Exactly what we want to see for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, because one of the concerns that we had at the beginning of the season was that they were running the ball at a crazy high clip, and now they're shifting toward that pass-heavy approach that we expected from the Bengals coming into the season. So that is definitely good news for those guys. The Browns are almost the polar opposite, though, passing the ball at 23rd rate in neutral situations and barely using their wide receivers in any successful fantasy type role. As you guys can see on the screen right now, wide receiver fantasy usage by team, the Browns rank 31st in the NFL. They're simply not using their wide receivers in the deep game, in the red zone. They run the ball, they use tight ends, whatever the case is, in those areas of the field. And that's definitely not good news for Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham because, certain offenses, as you guys can see, Buffalo uses their wide receivers in such advantageous positions for fantasy production that their wide receiver 3 is more valuable than the Browns wide receiver 1. It's just how it works when you use their wide receivers in that type of fashion. I still think Jarvis Landry is a decent flex play due to the targets that he's getting, but he's basically like an upgraded Jacoby Myers. He's Jacoby Myers with a bit more touchdown upside. That's basically what you're getting with Jarvis Landry, but he still is a solid flex play that I think is a good buy low candidate if you're in need of some wide receiver depth, if you're in a 3 wide receiver, 2 flex type of league like I'm in. So as you guys can see on the screen, these are the matchups for this game. Jamar Chase set to see a lot of Greedy Williams, T. Higgins on Greg Newsome, Jarvis Landry on Mike Hilton. So could be a big game for Jarvis Landry. He does have the best matchup advantage of anybody in this game. But like I said, Jamar Chase every week, top 10 wide receiver. T. Higgins every week, top 24 wide receiver. And then Jarvis Landry, decent flex option. At the tight end position in this game, you can stream CJ Uzomah. And I have him at 15 right now because the targets are very low for CJ Uzomah, but the routes are there and the big plays can help CJ Uzomah have like a Robert Tonyan from last year type of impact in this offense. So he's a guy that I think you could stream, but I would rather play guys like Zach Ertz, Jared Cook, Dan Arnold over a guy like CJ Uzomah because the usage simply isn't there for him. And he's not really a guy that I think you could trust week over week, but this is a pretty good matchup for him as a tight end, and he could have a big game in this one. So moving on to the next game, Bills at Jaguars. In this game, you could start all three Bills wide receivers, Diggs, Sanders, and Beasley. I also think you could start Marvin Jones, and you could flex Laviska Shenault. Now, the Bills have an awesome matchup in this one against the Jags defense that is just horrible. As you guys can see on the screen, my boss, Jared Smola, tweeted this out. 29th in yards allowed per game, 31st in completion rate per allowed. You could basically read all the stats there. They're just really bad against the pass. The Bills have a 31.5 implied point total per Vegas. This game has, I think, a 48.5 over under, and the Bills are favored by 14.5 right now. So I'm not sitting any of these Bills wide receivers. Just fire them up and hope that they get the production. I'm sure one of them probably won't perform, whether it's Beasley, Sanders, or Diggs, but you got to fire all three of these guys up because the game script, the game environment is just too juicy to not start these guys. The Bills stacks will be mega chalk in DFS this week if you guys are playing DFS. Josh Allen, Sanders, Diggs, Beasley, these guys are going to be very popular in DFS formats. The Bills, on the other hand, though, from the Jags side of things, they rank number 1 in pass defense DVOA, and they're extremely difficult against wide receivers, ranking 3rd in fewest adjusted fantasy points allowed. Basically, I use that term all the time. Real quick, what adjusted fantasy points allowed means is it accounts for the schedule that they're playing against. So this is a matchup that is not very advantageous for a guy like Marvin Jones and specifically Laviska Shenault as well. As you guys can see on the screen, Marvin Jones set to see Levi Wallace, not a very good matchup for him. And Laviska Shenault on Tre'Davious White. Again, these guys are not going to probably have the greatest games in the world, but if I had to put my money down and say that I need to start one of these guys, it will be Marvin Jones as a top 30, 32 wide receiver this week because this game script does favor the pass, and they might be playing from behind in this one. Cole Beasley on Trey Herndon in this one. You can see excellent advantage for him. Emmanuel Sanders on Tyson Campbell in this one. Again, excellent matchup for him. Same with Stephon Diggs. Those guys are going to split time versus Shaq Griffin and Tyson Campbell. So again, this is a very easy matchup for the Bills wide receivers. Should be a high-scoring game from the Bills side of things. Hopefully, the Jags get some garbage time production for those of us like myself who have Marvin Jones. At the tight end position, I kind of already talked about him, but Dan Arnold is a legit tight end option. With a pass-heavy game script in this one, 23 targets over the last 3 games for Dan Arnold. Since joining the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's seen his routes and his usage and his targets increase every single week to the point that this is an 80% of the routes, 15% target share tight end. And that's good enough for top 12 numbers, in my opinion. Even though this isn't a great offense, I still think Dan Arnold's usage and his involvement in the offense is worthy of being a top 12 tight end. He's a guy that you could fire up. I actually picked him up off waivers, and I'm flexing him over Robbie Anderson this week because I have so many guys on bye with Swift, Gibson, and Brady that I have to move my running backs who are normally in my flex into my starting running back slots, and I have to flex a second tight end in Darren Arnold. So could do worse, I suppose. All right, to the Houston Texans at the Miami Dolphins. Start Brandon Cooks in this game, start Jalen Waddle in this game, and flex Devontae Parker in this game. Tyrod Taylor is day-to-day still with the hamstring injury that he's been dealing with, and the Texans do have a bye next week. So my money is probably on Davis Mills starting this game yet again. Cooks could have a big game in this one, though. 3rd most adjusted fantasy points allowed, 2 wide receivers, and 26th in pass defense DVOA is Miami. They have been bad against wide receivers despite having 2 of the highest paid corners in the NFL right now on the outside. So Brandon Cook's a guy that I'm absolutely willing to fire up. Jalen Waddle and Devontae Parker on the other side of things, they look to be target funnels last week. Between those two and Mike Gesicki, it looks like Tua finally has enough firepower to put up points on a Texans defense that isn't very good as well. So Tua's performed pretty well against bad teams so far this season. He posted top 5 passing grades on the week in the 80s against Atlanta and Jacksonville in weeks 4 and 5, I believe. But he did post passing grades in the 50s against the Bills twice and the New England Patriots. So hopefully Tua's like a fair weather quarterback that can perform in easy matchups because this is an easy matchup for him. As you guys can see on the screen, the matchups there, Jalen Waddle against Tavir Thomas, Devontae Parker against Harris Mitchell. Brandon Cooks is expected to be shadowed by Xavier Howard. So up and down matchups in this game. But overall, I think this one could be sneaky high scoring. Not a bad matchup to get a couple mini stacks in DFS or whatever. But at the tight end position, start Mike Gesicki. Texans are the worst in the league at defending tight ends currently. Mike Gesicki has been a guy that has been used in the slot out wide, more like a wide receiver, but the Texans are just bad in general against this position. And the Dolphins offense actually does use their tight ends, whether it's Gesicki or Durham Smythe or a bunch of all these guys that they have, they do use them pretty well. So they should be able to move the ball on offense with a lot of success in this one. Like I said, I think Tua could be a half decent streaming option if you guys do need a quarterback this week with Brady and, some of these other guys on bye. So moving on to the Raiders at Giants. In this game, you can flex Kadarius Toney, flex Hunter Renfrow, and maybe low-end flex desperation play Bryan Edwards, although he is expected to see shadow coverage from James Bradberry in this one. So we'll have to see how this wide receiver core in Las Vegas shakes out now that Henry Ruggs is gone. I have Hunter Renfrow currently at wide receiver 35 this week and Bryan Edwards at 46. So I do think that Hunter Renfrow specifically is usable against a bad Giants pass defense. As you guys can see on the screen, Darnay Holmes has been really bad this year, and Hunter Renfrow should be able to take advantage of him. If you had to choose between some of these slot receivers that are all kind of low upside plays, I would play Hunter Renfrow over Jarvis Landry. I would play him over Tyler Boyd. I would play him over Jacoby Myers. So that's kind of where I'm at with Hunter Renfrow. Now that Ruggs is out of the offense, I think that opens up some targets for Renfrow and Edwards going forward. Kadarius Toney on the other side of things has been dealing with a litany of injuries, whether it's his hamstring, foot, whatever, and thumb that he suffered on Monday night. He did practice in limited fashion on Wednesday with a thumb injury. So we'll have to see, what the practice reports are today and tomorrow, determining whether Kadarius Toney can play. Sterling Shepard's already been ruled out, which definitely isn't a good sign for him long-term. So if Toney plays, he's a top 36 option for me. And he's a guy that I think you absolutely throw into your lineup. Like I said, matchups are on the screen. Bryan Edwards against James Bradberry, not an ideal matchup for him. Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller probably expected to carry the load in this one through the air. If you do a DFS lineup where you stack Derek Carr with somebody, I think Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller are probably the guys that I would go with personally. Darnay Holmes, like I said, not been very good against slot receivers this year, and Kadarius Toney up against Nate Hobbs in the slot on the other side of things. On the tight end position, like I said, start Darren Waller. I'd argue that Henry Ruggs being gone probably hurts Darren Waller's efficiency a little bit, because Henry Ruggs being as fast as he was opens up the middle of the field for a guy like Darren Waller, but it could, help aid Darren Waller from a target perspective. So I think it probably balances out overall, but the offense might take a little bit of a downtick, as I mentioned, with Ruggs no longer being with the team. To the 4:00 games, Chargers at Eagles. And this one's really tough for me to kind of work through, but start Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and flex Devontae Smith in this one. Like I said, this one's tough for me to work through. These two teams both rank top 2 in fewest adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So this game is a 50-point over-under, but the wide receivers have terrible matchups. So this could be a game where Austin Eckler, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, the tight ends, Goddard, and Jared Cook do a lot of the damage in this one because the wide receivers have terrible matchups. Both teams are very heavy in zone coverage, and neither of them really allow big plays over the top. So probably bad news for Mike Williams in this one, who is expected to be shadowed by Darius Slay. Not the greatest matchup for him. If I had to choose between these wide receivers, if I had both of them, I would choose Keenan Allen because, like I said, the zone coverage does favor a guy like Keenan Allen who can get open and find spots in the zone versus Mike Williams, who's more of a big play guy. Like I said, the running backs in this game, Eckler, Scott, Gainwell, probably the guys that carry the load. Smith was a non-factor, Devontae Smith, in the blowout win over Detroit last week. Targets are there. The usage is there. He's clearly the number 1 wide receiver, but this is a tough matchup, like I said, against the Chargers defense. As you guys can see on the screen, Devontae Smith expected to see fellow rookie Asante Samuel Jr. and Campbell as well. Quez Watkins in the slot against Chris Harris Jr. Keenan Allen, Avonte Maddox. Like I said, he has the best matchup on the field. If I had to choose one wide receiver to start from this game, it would be Keenan Allen, with Mike Williams expected to see a lot of Darius Slay. So at the tight end position, you start them both. Jared Cook and Dallas Goedert are both in my top 12 this week. Dallas Goedert has been heavily involved since Zach Ertz's departure. He's been a guy playing 80, 85, 90% of the routes and been getting heavily targeted, especially last week. So he's a guy that's an every week starter for me going forward. Jared Cook, on the other hand, could be the beneficiary, like I said, of the tough wide receiver matchup this week. And he has secured 5+ targets in 3 of his last 4 games. So he is a guy that I'm willing to stream if you need a guy right off the waiver wire that you can throw into your lineup, because the Chargers are probably going to put up points in this game. I just don't think it's going to come from Mike Williams on deep plays. So it'll probably be a lot of Austin Eckler, a lot of Keenan Allen, and a lot of Jared Cook. So Packers at Chiefs, the other 4 p.m. game that we have here. And a lot of these games are getting derailed by injuries and COVID stuff, but this could have been an awesome 4 p.m. slate, just off the record real quick. But in this game, start Devontae Adams and start Tyreek Hill. Devontae Adams, of course, will be without Aaron Rodgers this week, but I have no concerns really from his perspective as starting him as a top 6 wide receiver. Jordan Love can't be terrible at getting the ball to his best playmaker in Devontae Adams. And Hill is fresh off of an 18-target game, so I have no concerns starting him, even though the Chiefs' offense has been a little bit up and down as of late. Unfortunately, we were robbed of a potential shootout between Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. If Aaron Rodgers was playing, I no doubt in my mind, this would have been the mega chalk game for DFS this week, but maybe Jordan Love will surprise us. Maybe he'll actually put up a decent performance against a pretty bad Chiefs defense too. So he has a pretty decent matchup. A guy that I'm not messing with. If you guys need a streamer this week because you have Brady on bye, don't pick up Jordan Love. I'd rather play Taysom Hill. I'd rather play Tua. I'd rather play Derek Carr, some of these guys that might be available in your league as well. So as you can see on the screen, Devontae Adams expected to see Rashad Fenton as well as L'Jarius Sneed on the right and left side of the field. Tyreek Hill, Shannon Sullivan in the slot. And he should be a guy that, has a great game in this one. I'm not messing with Randall Cobb. I'm not messing with Alan Lazard or McCole Hardman or anybody else in this game personally. At the tight end position, start Travis Kelce and make sure that you buy him low because I can't believe that this Chiefs offense is going to be this bad the rest of the season. And I don't think Travis Kelce's washed up or anything like that. So he's a guy, if anybody values him outside of the top 3 tight ends rest of the season, he's still a guy that I'm willing to buy low. I don't think he's going to be quite the positional advantage that you initially anticipated when you drafted this guy at the back of the first round, early second round, but still a guy that I think is going to be a positional advantage nonetheless. So Cardinals at 49ers, again, another game that could be very good, but is kind of being derailed by injuries right now. There's so much up in the air in this game. Today, we didn't see Kyler Murray or DeAndre Hopkins practice, and they didn't practice yesterday either. So we have no idea if they're going to play, but if Hopkins plays, of course, you throw him into your lineup. Deebo Samuel also dealing with a calf injury. We don't know if he's going to play. And if he sits, then, of course, you can start Brandon Ayuk as well. And if Hopkins is out, I think you could probably flex AJ Green, Rondale Moore, and Christian Kirk. Although if you need to flex Christian Kirk, even with Hopkins playing, I think you could probably do that as well. So like I said, a lot of news swirling around about these two teams. Kyler and Hopkins did not practice today, did not practice yesterday. So putting their status in doubt for Sunday. And I saw an article on Twitter basically saying that, I don't think Kyler Murray is going to play this week. So if they are playing, obviously they're obvious starts in this one, but keep an eye on their Friday practice report and the news going forward. Deebo Samuel, like I said, dealing with a calf injury that he was dealing with the last couple of weeks. If he's out, I'm firing Brandon Ayuk up as a top 36 guy because we saw Brandon Ayuk last week get back to his full allotment of routes, full allotment of snaps, and had a season high 7 targets last week. So even if he plays, Deebo, I think you could do worse than starting Brandon Ayuk as a low-end flex option this week as well. As I mentioned, as you guys can see on the screen, DeAndre Hopkins, if he plays, is expected to see Josh Norman in coverage, Deebo Samuel, Robert Alford, Brandon Ayuk on Marco Wilson, and Christian Kirk on Kawon Williams. So like I said, those are the primary 4 guys that I'm looking to start. But if anybody's out, then you could probably bump up the ancillary pieces. At the tight end position, it does sound like George Kittle is going to be back this week from a 3-4 week absence with a calf injury, similar to what Deebo Samuel is dealing with right now. So if George Kittle does play in this one and Deebo Samuel does not, he's a top 3 tight end. If Deebo Samuel plays and George Kittle plays, he's a top 6 tight end. I do expect George Kittle to play based on everything that we've seen. He is practicing right now. So he should be back in your lineup for those of you guys that have George Kittle. 2 Sunday Night Football, and this one's going to be pretty interesting. Injuries haven't ruined this one yet for us, but there's still time, of course. The Titans, actually, I guess the injuries have ruined this one because we don't have Derrick Henry in this one. Anyway, Titans at Rams. Start the big 2 on each team. Basically, pretty simple to me, and I think you can low-end flex Van Jefferson as well. I talked about the Titans duo yesterday, but this team will need to rely more on the passing game now that Derrick Henry is out. They can't expect AD and Jeremy McNichols to be Derrick Henry because they're not, at least not at this point in Adrian Peterson's career. He can't be what Derrick Henry represented for this offense. What they need is for AJ Brown to be AJ Brown and Julio Jones to be Julio Jones if they want any chance of holding that number 1 seed that they're currently sitting at in the AFC right now. Julio practiced Wednesday, which is a good sign for Sunday night. We haven't gotten any practice reports today yet about what Julio Jones is doing, but I think he is going to play based on how late he was ruled out in the process last week and the fact that he's already practicing this week. The Rams ranked top 10 in pass defense DVOA, so this probably won't be an easy one for the Titans duo, but nonetheless, I am throwing them into my lineup. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods on the Rams side of things have a smash spot against the Titans defense, currently allowing the 4th most adjusted fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. So those guys should be in for a great game. Of course, we expect that every single week out of Cooper Kupp, but Robert Woods and Van Jefferson, like I said, he is the clearly number 3 in this offense with Deshaun Jackson now cut, running over 90% of the routes the last 2 games. He can be started as a flex option in this game. Like I said, this is a good matchup. This should be a game where the Rams are able to put up a lot of points. As you guys can see on the screen, Cooper Kupp is expected to see rookie Elijah Molden in the slot. That's not going to end well. Cooper Kupp is the number 1 wide receiver on the week for me. Robert Woods against Janoris Jenkins on the outside and Van Jefferson against Greg Maben on the outside. So pretty good matchup for those guys all around. AJ Brown against Jalen Ramsey in the slot, though, so that is not ideal for him. Hasn't been a guy that's been shadowing opposing number one wide receivers. PFF doesn't expect him to shadow A.J. Brown in this game, but it is still going to be a big-time matchup between those two guys who can get the edge over the other. Like I said, if Julio Jones plays, probably slides into where Marcus Johnson is aligned against Deontay Dion. So hopefully Julio's out there to help take some pressure off of A.J. Brown with no Derrick Henry out there. So at the tight end position, start Tyler Higbee. Great offense, running all the routes that he needs to run, and he's always a threat to score a touchdown. Not a highly targeted guy, but he is kind of in that Hunter Henry range where, 4, 5, 6 targets a game and will have a good opportunity for a touchdown. So Tyler Higbee, still in every week, top 12, top 15 tight end, guaranteed for me in this offense. Monday Night Football, the last game of the slate, Bears at Steelers. In this game, you can comfortably start Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and sit all of the Bears wide receivers. So Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool are kind of working well together right now. Deontay Johnson is the target hog of this offense. Chase Claypool gets the downfield looks, gets the valuable looks. I discussed Chase Claypool on Tuesday's buy low video because since the Juju injury, Chase Claypool has been running over 90% of the routes, which has been pretty much career highs for him up until this point. So buy Chase Claypool while you can. He's definitely going to have a big game at some point. The Bears wide receivers, on the other hand, did get some hope last week from Justin Fields having a solid outing. However, I still can't trust the Bears wide receivers as anything more than a desperation flex play. Might be worth sending trade offers for Allen Robinson right now, just because he's worth absolutely nothing to the opposing manager that has Allen Robinson. And he may see a resurgence down the stretch. If Justin Fields gets any better and gets better as a passer, maybe they open up this offense a little bit more. Maybe Allen Robinson is a guy that you can buy low and he could pay off big down the stretch, but not a guy that I'm, breaking the bank for in trade offers. As you guys can see on the screen, these are the matchups. Deontay Johnson should see a lot of Jalen Johnson and Chase Claypool against Kindle Vildor. Kindle Vildor has been routinely beaten by opposing wide receivers, most notably Mike Evans and a couple other guys that we've seen so far. Allen Robinson, Arthur Mollett in coverage should be a good matchup for him. But again, he's had a number of good matchups over the last couple of weeks and has yet to produce a top 12, top 15, top 20, top 30, even wide receiver performance so far this season. So again, like I said, not starting the Bears wide receivers, but Allen Robinson does have a good matchup this week. At the tight end position, to close things out, you can stream Pat Freiermuth going forward, in my opinion. The usage isn't ideal yet, but 43%, 51%, and 65%, a career high so far for Pat Freiermuth of the routes so far these past 3 games. His role is increasing and so is his target share. So he could be a guy that's a factor late in the season if you want to pick him up and stash him. If you're kind of streaming the tight end position, I do think he's somebody that needs to be on your radar because he's clearly talented. He's clearly a piece of this offense and his role is increasing. So like I said, if you guys did enjoy this video, hit the like button down below, helps us grow, helps us out tremendously, lets people know, hey, people like this content. We should show it to other people, and that helps us grow, like I said. So subscribe to the channel if you are new as well. We do appreciate new subscribers. We are looking to get to 10,000 subscribers by the 1st of January, and comment any of your thoughts down below as well. If you guys are looking to support us in any way, you can go to underdogfantasy.com using promo code FSC at sign up and first deposit. You will get a 100% match back on whatever you deposit. So if you put down $20, you'll get $40 on the site to play with, play some of their pick'em games, some of their rivals. They're super fun. I play them all the time. And by doing that, as a thank you, you'll also get access to our weekly rankings, dynasty rankings, and our rest of season rankings as well. So please do that if you want. And also go to patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange and sign up on there to become a supporter of the channel. And also, if you want to book a fantasy football consultation, you can do that on our website as well. So peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.